All right. Good morning, EO Nashville. Happy Friday. Welcome. I am very happy and honored to introduce our 11th installment of this hugely successful EO Exchange series. Our topic this morning is cybersecurity, protecting your business financially, legally, and technically. And I already saw an email come through about this topic in our group email this morning. So hopefully it will be timely as the rest of this EO Exchange series has been. Your feedback indicates that we've continued to enjoy these events, to make connections and learn about these timely topics. So we have continued, and we're happy to see so many of you join us this morning. In the last 15 minutes of this session, we're going to invite you guys to make connections. So be sure to stick around. We will also have a Q&A, and make sure that as questions pop up, feel free to drop them in the chat, and we'll get to those. We'll have a Q&A section. If you haven't been on one of these before, the EO Exchange series is about learning as well as connecting with members from the chapter. So at the end, we'll break everyone out into small groups and have some discussion points to chat. So with that, let me just introduce our knowledgeable panel for this morning. Strategic Alliance partners Paul Steele and Amy Leppold, I hope I'm saying that right, are joining us.
Just like the cat.
Perfect, got it. Are joining us with EO member and past president, Debbie Gordon. A little about Paul. He started with Martin and Zerfoss in early 2005. He is currently principal and president of the company. Martin and Zerfoss is a local, independently owned insurance agency with a rich 43-year history of serving Nashville. Paul is a Nashville native, Vanderbilt graduate, and proud father of 3 daughters. Amy is a partner at Bradley in the Nashville office, where she co-leads the law firm's cybersecurity and privacy team. The Bradley cyber team assists clients with practical insights and solutions to reduce risk, limit liability, handle crisis response, and regulatory enforcements. Amy is certified by the International Association of Privacy Professionals. And finally, EO member Debbie Gordon has served as chapter president as well as held leadership positions at the EO global level. Debbie is on her third-ish entrepreneurial venture. Don't we all know how that goes? Leading a new category in the cybersecurity space. CloudRange prepares large organizations and governments to detect and defend against cyber attacks using a proprietary simulation platform that reduces the likelihood of a data breach. CloudRange has customers on every continent while also working with numerous Fortune 1000 companies. Named one of the hot 150 cybersecurity companies to watch in 2020, Debbie is looking forward to getting some rest in a few years, but not yet. So thank you all for sharing with us this morning. Thank you guys for joining us. Again, let's drop any questions in the chat for their Q&A portion, and feel free to stick around. We hope that you'll stay all the way until the end of this session, and I will turn it over to our panel.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for being here. And thanks, Marla and Samira, for setting this up. So I want to just throw a quick question out at everybody, and you can chat in your answer. Just think about one thing that cybersecurity means to you, or one thing that you in your company, you do in your company, or people in your company do in regards to cybersecurity. So what do you currently do to be more secure? Or what's something you think about when you think about cybersecurity? So just chat in your thought there. All right. Educate employees on types of hacks. What else? Phishing email testing, yes. Training, fake email testing, right. firewalls, multi-factor authentication, all good stuff. So there are, where we deal in our business, we're dealing with cybersecurity professionals, you know, the engineers, the people who are actually setting up the firewalls and setting up multi-factor authentication and managing data and networks. But 99% of cyber attacks happen because of human error. And that human error is somebody clicking on that email that they shouldn't, or you all probably have somebody who is older in your life that says, but they said that I had to click on it or else I would have to pay money. So those mothers and mothers-in-laws are very common who do that. But there are a lot of simple things that you all can do. And I know that cybersecurity is something that is overwhelming. If you had asked me 15 years ago if I'd be in the cybersecurity space, I would have had absolutely no clue. But it's such an important issue. And one of the problems with cybersecurity, and that makes it hard for everybody, whether you're in a big or small company, is that the types of threats and hacks are increasing, and the bad guys just have to stay ahead of every good guy in a company. And so the more and more types of threats there are, the more and more technologies that come out to try to prevent and detect attacks, that requires more people with skills. And there's 3.5 million open jobs in cybersecurity globally today. So if any of you ever decide to get out of entrepreneurship and go want a job in cybersecurity, that's where to go. And these kids are making, you know, a lot of money out of school. So a lot of kids are actually, you know, I've had EO members reach out to me about their kids wanting to get into it. So that's also something to think about. But it is a very, it's challenging. And so hopefully today we can talk about some things that you all can do, and also how you want to prioritize cybersecurity in your company. When we were talking on our prep call for this, you know, I always think about the urgent versus important quadrant. And how, you know, there's things that, and Paul, I see you nodding your head because you think about this every day on the insurance side, is that there are things that are important and there are things that are urgent. And when something is important and not urgent, you're not going to do anything about it. And, you know, that might be buying insurance, because a lot of people say, oh, I don't need it until something bad happens, or getting a flu shot until after you have the flu the first time. So there are all these things that you have to decide as a business owner that you want to prioritize. And some of those categories that we'll cover today are, you can hire somebody to manage your cybersecurity. And a lot of times that person that is doing quote unquote cybersecurity in smaller companies is just a person who is also the IT person. They also may be the HR person. And what they do in cybersecurity could be very technical. It could be teaching people how not to click on the bad emails. So you can hire technical folks. You can make sure you can decide to outsource. And so managed security service providers is a whole category of services where no matter what size your business is, they will be your cybersecurity department. And so, you know, managed security service providers, there's a lot of them locally and, you know, all around the globe, but anyone from a dental practice to even a Fortune 1000 company or a Fortune 100 company will outsource certain parts or all of their cybersecurity to a managed security service provider. So that's also something to think about, even if it's just a matter of patching your software. I was on the phone the other day with somebody from the Secret Service, because what I learned recently, the Secret Service is actually over our financial systems. We think about it protecting presidents, but they actually protect our financial systems, and they had been part of the Treasury for many, many, many years. And the gentleman that I was speaking with was talking about a gas station owner who had an old POS system on the counter. So the credit card swipe and an old monitor. And just, if you can imagine, you know, sitting next to the gum, this dusty, nasty credit card machine. And that thing hadn't been updated in 15 years. And that is flypaper for hackers. somebody sticks a USB drive on the counter of the gas station, and the person at the gas station says, "What's this?" and they stick it in the computer, bam, everyone who runs their credit cards through that gas station can be threatened. So no matter how big or small you are, this is very important, and there's simple things to do. And even patching is one of the things that MSSPs can do for you. Also insurance. So Paul's on here today, and I know there's, we have other members who do this. Insurance is something that a lot of times you're going to be required to have insurance coming up in the near future. And I know Paul will talk about that. But I can't stress enough the don't wait till it's too late, because it can happen to you. Luckily, it probably hasn't happened to many people if any, on this call, but it can. In the title of this presentation, we had technically, financially, and something else, protecting your business. Protecting your business's existence, because a very, very high percentage of businesses go out of business when they are breached. And that can happen to anyone. So I don't want to, create this fear in everyone, but it is something to take very seriously, especially when you don't know what you don't know. So those are just some things to think about. It's something where every little bit you do can help. And I hope you guys will get something out of our discussion today. So I would like to turn it over to, Marla, I'm sorry, am I turning it to Paul or Amy? Amy, thank you. Amy.
I think me, yeah.
Yes, thank you. And Amy from Baker, or Bradley, I'm so sorry.
Yeah,
Amy,
hi, Debbie.
hi, how are you?
Good. Happy Friday, everybody. My name is Amy Leopard. I'm a partner at Bradley, and I work with a team of lawyers across all of our Bradley offices throughout the Southeast. Looking at privacy and security, we do, a lot of breach response, which has kept us busy in 2020. Under COVID, I think the prevalence
I think we lost her.
Did we lose her?
Oh, I'll chime in until she comes back, maybe. Keep this ball rolling. Wanted Amy to talk next, just because what she gets into, kind of what Debbie talks about, kind of preparation, and then what Amy talks about, legal. There's all kinds of federal and state laws and requirements, I think, are all good setups to what's my last step, which is potentially buying insurance. But also wanted to get probably more into what I see clients and issues in the industry. So it's and if Amy comes back on, I'll throw it back to her and come back to me. But it's, Debbie said it perfectly. My first thoughts are, don't be cheap when it comes to cyber liability and protecting your company. It's really important. I talk to all my clients about their risk management team. The risk management team is your attorney who's doing your contracts, setting up your company, making sure you're protected. You've got your insurance person who's giving you the insurance you need so you can risk transfer your issues to the insurance company if you get sued for something or have a car accident, whatever it might be. And then I'm going to add in your CPA is going to help you financially, maybe help your CFO guide checks and balances, do the right things. And then lastly, you're going to have your IT professional. And that's something in the last 20 years has developed where, in the 90s, maybe the IT professional wasn't part of your risk management team, but today they are. So it's important to sit down with that person, have that meeting, talk to them, whether it's a third, both checks and balances. I think it's important to have checks and balances with people. You can have your third party company kind of helping out your IT person and vice versa, and they can know that you're on top of everything. So I think what Dave was talking about, the credit card machine, goes with all of your technology, upgrading, always adding the patches. We all have our iPhones and you get the updates. That's exactly what those are there for. My wife was afraid to do updates for a long time, but she was afraid she's going to lose her pictures or something like that. And I said, actually, the opposite is going to happen. If you don't do your updates, you're going to lose all your pictures. Someone's going to hack into your system. So the two most common issues we see are ransomware and social engineering. Are the two most common kind of threats out there. There's all kinds of cyber hacks going on. And the ransomware usually happens, and the social engineering happens through these phishing or spear phishing type emails you see where you click on a link because you think it's innocent, or you open an attachment, and all of a sudden someone's behind your firewall. You spend all this money and time creating this beautiful firewall, and it's only as good as the people who have access behind it, which is all your employees. Debbie's comment about 99% of all attacks are human error, and that's kind of what it gets into. But the social engineering, you guys have probably heard this, and it's growing and growing every year, where you get an email from what appears to be a trusted person. Maybe you're the CFO of the company, maybe it's somebody you have a business relationship with, and they say, hey, I need you to go give me some gift cards, or I need you to transfer this wire $40,000 to this account because we're going to go buy this land or buy a new vehicle or whatever it is. And people believe that, and so they do wire the money. What I've heard, and some IT people could probably speak more to it, is the average amount of time a hacker is behind your firewall just watching before they do anything is 6 months. So I think it's fair to say and safe to say, pretend that there's always somebody watching your email, because there could be. And that person is sitting there and they're waiting for the right opportunity, where you're out of the country or you're not really in good access to email and phone. So someone can call you and check in, and maybe there's a business deal going on. Maybe there's usually there is a legit wire transfer happening, and you'll get the bank, someone will send you the wire instructions, and then you'll get a second email that'll say, oh, I'm really sorry, those are the wrong instructions, use these. And the second email can come from the hacker. So, and you think it's the person who sent you the first email. Always two-factor authentication also happens with this stuff, where you get on the phone, call the person and say, did you send me this email? It's always a good idea. Text person, call them and say, did you send me this email? By the way, don't email them back and ask them if they sent you that email, because the hacker's still there and they can still go, yeah, that's from me. So just little things. And if you meet with your IT professional every year, twice a year, as often as you want to, they will coach you on these things and get you the right kind of checks and balances in your office you need. Insurance is the last piece. I want you to talk to companies like Debbie's company, and I want you to meet with people like Amy in your contracts, get all the proactive stuff in place, your IT person. The insurance piece is the very, very last piece. That is, everything else I put in place failed, and therefore I need insurance. I love, Debbie mentioned the whole urgent versus important, which is how I feel like I live my life. Insurance rarely seems urgent unless there is an emergency where you need your insurance. A flood, we've had those. Great tornado, we've had those. But a cyber attack where you're supposed to be HIPAA compliant and all your patient files were just stolen. Or you're supposed to be PCI compliant, but you have not updated your credit card machine in I don't know how many years, because it costs money and you don't want to spend the money. And now there's a breach because somebody's been sitting out there and siphoning off the credit card numbers that come through your system. So, and a lot of people think that the third-party companies they use, oh, I store all my stuff, all my files in Amazon's cloud services, or I have a third-party credit card company. Read those contracts, because a lot of them say they're not responsible. The federal government even says, and Amy can speak to this better than I can, that the person who takes the information is the one that's legally responsible for the information, not who stores it. So keep that in mind. You're the one that takes information from your customers. You're the one who takes the credit card from the customers. You need to protect yourself. You need to be reading those documents that have an effect on your PCI compliance and your HIPAA. Make sure you just where you're storing your information. Make sure you're doing everything you can do. And the last thing you could do is buy insurance to protect you against social engineering and ransomware. Ransomware is where they lock down your computer, by the way, where your whole system's locked down, and you get a notification that says, hey, pay me $50,000 in Bitcoin, and I'll give you the keys to unlock your computer. And I know your first thought is, well, I don't want to pay them any money because I don't know they're going to do it. Well, if you have ransomware, or you can go to a third-party company, and there's a lot of companies that do this. I mean, if you have insurance or a third-party company, they can navigate that whole system for you. These bad actors, these hackers that have locked down your system, they're legit, it sounds weird, but legit business people in their country. They show up to a cubicle 8 to 5. They have goals. This is what they do for a living. This is their job. And they'll give you their phone number on the little pop-up that says, if you have trouble with Bitcoin or paying, give me a call. And the guy calls, and and he's like, hey, what's up? He's calm, he's nice. You're ticked off. It's an odd situation, but your insurance company can help you navigate that to where you don't have to. They'll help you get the Bitcoin. They'll help you transaction it. there are, of the bad players, there are professionals in that world, and those professionals will give you the keys, and they have a reputation for giving you the keys to unlock your computer if you pay them. There are other people that are double dippers and they have a reputation for being double dippers, meaning if they ask for $25,000, they're going to ask for more after you pay that, and then they'll give you the keys. And then there's just pure evil, bad actors who are just doing it, and they have no intention to give you the keys. And those are the ones where your insurance company and the third party IT company can say, don't pay them because it's a waste of money. And then you literally have to, I'm an IT professional, and they can tell you what you'd have to do if you didn't, but I'm pretty sure it'd scrub your entire system and reload it. And people think that's a really easy process. And any IT professional can tell you it is not an easy process. And a lot of times when you reload it, it does not come back the way you thought it would. It's not perfect. There's glitches, there's issues, and your business suffers because now you're focused on all this stuff over here and you're not running your business. You're not growing your business. You're not working where you need to work every day. And so your business can suffer to sometimes a debilitating amount where, like Debbie said, where it can go out of business. So, and you can buy insurance for the business income loss on it. They help you, third party, if you get sued because your customer's information is gone, the insurance can help protect you there. But I always tell all my clients, before you buy the insurance, do the first couple steps. Be smart, don't cheap out, upgrade your information, talk to your IT professionals, get your lawyers on the phone, and make sure you're doing all the right things first. And insurance is just the last piece of the puzzle, just to kind of protect you if all those first things don't go well.
I want to add one thing to what Paul just said, and just to bring this home a little bit. One of our fellow members in Nashville lost $60,000 because her CFO received an email from her in the same tone that they would normally communicate, and it was a back and forth email. So the bad actor had put a filter or rule in her email that if that they would be notified, and then any emails coming back would go into trash, so she wouldn't know that a conversation was going back and forth. And the CFO received an email from her, but wasn't really her, saying, please wire this money. And the CFO did it and never recovered. And what I personally learned from that, because it's a friend of mine here at INEO Nashville, I learned very quickly in my company that any amount to be paid over a certain amount of money needs a verbal phone call. Just like at the bank, when you initiate a wire, they're going to call it, or an ACH or whatever, or wire, they're going to call you and verbally get confirmation. Because no matter how real it was a real email address. It was her email address. It was how she speaks, how she signs her emails, but it was not her. And the person had just been watching her tone and how they communicate. And that's what happens. Like Paul said, these bad actors are in there for a long time. This wasn't just somebody who showed up on their network the day before. They were scoping it out. And so there's a very good chance that there are bad actors already in our systems.
Yeah, Debbie, this is Amy. I think I'm back on. We see that all the time. This, training can help prevent that, and having those kind of protocols in place would certainly prevent that. So some of this stuff you can get out in front of. You can be proactive. You can make a difference. Ransomware, let's think about that. I mean, it is a very difficult thing to, essentially, you're up against the cyber mafia, as Paul mentioned. I mean, this is a business. We had 2 ransomware events going at the same time recently where you can see it's programmed. They have people that are using the same software and the same drill to try to, obtain large amounts of money, so particularly in healthcare. That's a big target now. But if you do have all of your IT infrastructure or your data locked down, but you have a good backup plan and good disaster recovery, then it's really just a question of bringing your systems back online rather than trying to figure out if you have to, pay the ransom. So some of these things, even though, you're essentially fighting, cyber criminals in nation states, you can try to get in front of it. And you can also have some type of response plan that you've practiced so that when the crisis occurs, it's kind of like the martial arts. You can stay composed, you know what to expect, your team can, just pull out the plan and begin to do what you need to do to contain what has occurred. What one thing we're seeing is really, companies are having to take a risk-based approach to how they confront cybersecurity and really look at your business model. You may have there's a difference between a company that have products without much IP versus companies that your business model deals with data and protect. You definitely would need to protect your crown jewels, but you also have to look at some of the changes that are occurring in state laws. California, Virginia, we're seeing other states, Florida, Washington, bringing on legislation that actually, prohibits certain activities with data, selling data. So you also want to make sure if you're building a business strategy around data that you can continue to do that in the long haul, and that if data and technology are part of your core business, that you're setting these priorities and taking steps to mitigate them. And as Debbie mentioned, managed security services is something we're seeing small companies go to in large part because they recognize the difficulty in keeping up with cyber defense and security patches and monitoring and surveillance type activities.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you to our panel for jumping in there and for being flexible as Amy had to dip out and get back on. Go figure. Hopefully it wasn't a hacker or somebody that kicked you off of there. But we have no questions so far in the Q&A. So I'm going to kick us off and maybe I'll inspire some other questions. Feel free to drop them in the chat. My question is, we talked a lot about the threats that exist. And these things are real, by the way. I had a team member that experienced this ransomware, and it was an expensive lesson for us to learn to get some of our data back that we needed. But maybe if everyone else feels like me, now we're just kind of stressing out. It's like, oh my gosh, I totally don't have this figured out. What are some tactical things, or where do we start, today that we can at least start eliminating some of these larger threats?
Doing all the right things, right? The small things that we mentioned. I mean, you have to do all the little bitty things, and they add up to hopefully the big thing of stopping the threats, right? So it's upgrading your software, talking to your IT people, making sure that your staff is well educated on phishing emails, spear phishing emails. There's kind of a healthy paranoia that you can have with emails, I think, where you get them and you go, is this from Debbie? Is this from Samira? If it's generally about booking a meeting, obviously you don't need to be that paranoid. That seems a little weird if somebody was trying to trick you into going to a coffee meeting or something. But if it's related to financial data, if it's related to clicking on any link, you should always think twice or 3 times before you would do it. And if that means calling the person and say, did you send me this email? I know that's an extra step. It's not fun. We're all busy, but I'd do it.
Yeah. And there are a lot of security awareness training products out there that are very affordable, and just ensuring that your staff all go through them, because they're multi-factor and enabling multi-factor authentication on everything should just be a rule of thumb. Not
Yeah.
clicking on links from somebody you don't know, and even if you do know them, maybe you actually don't know them. And then the transacting payments with an email notification shouldn't be allowed. So those are some very, very simple things that could prevent a lot of other bad things. One thing we haven't talked about is third-party applications, where, and if you guys are familiar with the SolarWinds attack that happened a few months ago that affected so many companies, that was actually a third party that had gotten into SolarWinds. And so a lot of these things, a lot of bad actors don't go directly into a company. They go through one of the vendors that they're using. And so if you guys are using, for example, if you're using any software, make sure that you get documentation from them. And then I think there's some people on this call here who are developers. And there's a lot of, I'm sure you guys are doing application security testing too, before you sell to your customers. But I mean, that's a huge thing. If any of you are doing business with large companies and you're selling software to them, they're going to want to know how you're testing your products too, because that's where most of the stuff comes in. It's not direct.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of strong controls on business partners, particularly in regulated industries like, healthcare and financial services. And so some of your companies may be the recipient of those controls, but having those kinds of, kick the tires, that's how the Target breach occurred, is, the HVAC supplier was the weakest link in the chain. And so the bad guys are able to find that and get into the main company. And then I think, as the training and on the MFA issue, our cyber agents at the FBI office here in Nashville are fond of saying that 80% of hacking could be prevented by multi-factor authentication. So that is definitely a step, especially with remote workers.
Yeah, another small thing needs to happen just to kind of get to the bigger goal, I think, that Brandon was talking about, of how to protect your company.
That's totally fascinating. Paul, you had mentioned the manual two-factor authentication, which is you get an email and you actually call, right?
Yeah.
But this two-factor authentication from a digital standpoint is something that we're seeing increasingly more often everywhere. And it's such a simple thing that almost seems annoying sometimes, but hearing you guys, the experts, say, that really is effective at preventing this stuff. I mean, a small inconvenience for a lot more protection. So that's really, really interesting. We've got two questions here. I'm going to jump to the second one because it's more related. Robert Young asks, can you give us some indicators to immediately recognize that an email may be a scam?
I'll give you one example, and this was just from my personal experience. So I got an email from a friend, actually the husband of an EO member, showing me a boat, and it was a link to a Facebook ad. And this person had never emailed me before, but we had all talked about boats, and so I thought and it was very succinct. So I thought, this is weird. So what I did was I hovered over the link and looked at the Facebook. It was like, facebook.com/marketplace/ and then a number or something like that. And so I took note of what that number is without clicking on it. And I went into Facebook manually and looked at the marketplace and typed in the number, and voila, it actually was a boat, and it actually was real. And he was telling me about this boat, but I was very suspicious. But that's the way you can do it, is look what's behind the URL if somebody is sending you a link. So that's that was just one example. There's a lot of ways, and looking at the domain of the sender email. I didn't know his email address, so I didn't know if it was real. But you know, a lot of the things come from the example of our fellow member who had the money sent from her CFO. That was her real address. So the CFO wouldn't have known that wasn't her by looking at the address. But you can also look at the from address and look for misspellings in it. So if it's from, American Express instead of American Express, there's little typos that bad guys will make, and just to make it visually look just like a real email address.
I think what Debbie's saying is yes, and very detailed, but the bigger picture is if it doesn't look right, it's probably not right, right? She's got a link from a person who never sends her an email. And so you just need to investigate that, is take it slower. And we get into this world, we got our cell phones and you can get through 50 emails in 5 minutes, right? Well, the ones that are a little questionable, those 50 emails, maybe you take a little more time. It's just kind of slowing down. Love David said, trust but verify. Absolutely. Get in there and just slow it down and just double check, read the email carefully. I love Wade was up here saying that they copied some old emails of his and had his exact language. They will mess that up most of the time. They won't get your exact language right. I've heard stories where they missed punctuation and they knew their CEO never misses a punctuation, right? He's got all his commas and perfect. And so you can find something that's just not quite right if you're reading the email well. It just goes into slowing down and watching things and making sure that you're just paying attention to your emails. Pretend like you don't know, you have to double check every email.
The
Yeah,
word
what they did was copy an approved invoice that I had sent before to my bookkeeper, and then just change the invoice to a higher amount. So it wasn't like an old email, but they did the same thing Debbie said. They created a rule that all went through a cycle. We figured it out in a few hours, but it was amazing how quick they got in. And it was when I was on the road. I think I got hacked at some place where I was on a different server, not in my office. But then after that's when we introduced the multi-factor authentication for everybody's emails, and it's scary how quick it can happen.
Yeah, and I would add on those phishing campaigns just to keep doing them and give feedback to the employees. I mean, we're a law firm. We have very sensitive data, and we started doing it several years ago, and doing the testing on the phishing campaigns and then letting people know they failed. And that's an expectation. And then doing some more training and testing again. But there's data that shows that no matter how much security awareness training and testing you do, you have 4% of your employees are just going to click on anything. So you need to have those other controls in place on the technical side. And again, you need to be monitoring to see what's going on your network and, who's in there and what data is coming and going.
It's so interesting. The word control, which, there are entire courses in business school to talk about business controls, and cybersecurity is just a new area that we really need to be thinking about and improving in our businesses, just as we would any other levers of control, whether that be accounting or otherwise. So yeah, it's really interesting just to kind of see this stuff highlighted. One other thought that I had is just, as these threats become more and more real, and as any of us may experience them in our own businesses, we have this amazing network in our chapter, and sending an email to the Google group and saying, hey, we just saw this is what happened, here's what they tried to do, look out, and working that into a culture of sharing and also continuous training for team members and things. Just a thought. We had one other question from David from Dev Digital. Hey, David. He asked, when buying insurance, does the carrier underwrite based on a threat assessment? Probably one for Paul.
Great question, and that's ever changing. The market's actually tightening. For many, many years, the cyber market was pretty loose. I mean, they would write $1 million, $5 million limits and do very little upfront work. It was kind of scary. I think they were just trying to build the market. So you've got to have a lot of people involved in any market in order for them to have the buying power, the premiums coming in so they can pay out claims. It's shifting. There's basically a minimum to play these days, right? So you have to have things like two-factor authentication. You have to have some of these protocols in place to get approved for a quote, is what we're seeing the shift to. And then the larger the company and or the space you're in, Amy mentioned, healthcare and financial institutions, their requirements are much, much higher. So when you ask whoever your insurance professional is, doesn't matter who they are, you say, I would like a cyber quote. I just want to see what it's going to cost. Just be curious. You'll get the application, and there's a bunch of questions on there that say, do you have two-factor authentication on all your laptops, cell phones, whatever? The answer is yes, because if the answer is no, you're going to get declined. And the answer needs to be yes, but you actually need to be doing it, because if you're not doing it, you lie in your application, that's fraud, and they don't have to pay your claim. So that list of questions you're going to see in your cyber application is the minimum to play to get coverage, and you need to be doing all those things. And if you don't know what something is, call your IT professional. That's a perfect kind of sign to go, I need to educate myself. If I don't know what these things are as a business owner, I need to educate myself and figure out what they are and kind of figure out the pricing. Can I do this? Is it something I need? It may not be applicable to your business, and maybe you don't have to answer it. Maybe it's an NA, which is fine. But yeah, the more, depending on the industry you're in, and the more files you have that are kind of sensitive, financial, HIPAA related, the more they're going to require you, and the requirements can get pretty heavy, and they can limit the amount of coverage they'll give you just because they're a little afraid of what you have out there.
And Paul, what we're seeing, especially in healthcare, is that you might need to have insurance to come to the table. To be considered as a vendor. That is just kind of a cost of doing business these days, is that if you're a service provider to an organization that has very sensitive data, that you may not only need to kind of come to the table with cyber insurance, but you might even be in a situation where you're having to negotiate your coverage limits. That seems to be a very common occurrence in the last year or two.
If you do business with healthcare companies, hospitals, large healthcare, you're typically gonna, 5 million is the most common limit that I'm seeing as a contractual requirement for your business. And I don't care if you're the plumbing company. It does not matter what vendor role you have. They're gonna want you to have their boilerplate contract's gonna call for 5 million. And that's when you can get kind of lawyers involved to have conversations, or insurance professionals involved to kind of say, hey, like, we're, just changing out the air filters. We don't have access to, computer systems or whatever. Can you just take that down to 1 million, or maybe even scrap that? They probably won't scrap it, but they might adjust the limits, maybe.
Yeah, for sure. That's kind of back to the need to take a risk-based approach to decision making, and to know what you have and what you don't have, and how you're protecting it, and that can help you find the pathway through that contracting process.
Okay, great. We're gonna break out into our small groups here. Again, thank you so much to our panel for sharing their wealth of knowledge with us, and we hope they'll stick around, and that you guys will stick around for the connections portion of this EO Exchange event. We're going to break out, and we'll come back together.